Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our monthly mid-market tech talks. Those of you who have signed up will get a black stainless steel Yeti mug on the picture on the slide. So we really appreciate your attendance here. Now, we vary our topics every single month. This time, we're going to talk about cyber data resilience and ransomware protection. This is an issue that is global and impacts companies, big, medium, and small, governments from the city council all the way to the federal government, or of all countries, not just the United States. So joining me today for our conversation is going to be Dan Thompson from IBM. He's a data protection architect and deals with companies of all sizes, big, medium, and small. And Kurt Meschlinger, who also deals with companies of all sizes. They are based in North America, and they help companies really understand how cyber and data resilience fits in. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to kick this off with the scare tactic. And by the way, I can't scare you as much as the newspaper will scare you. As you all may know, cybersecurity is top of mind. Fortune magazine came out with the U.S. Fortune 5 or North America Fortune 500 in early June. They asked the CEOs, so not the CTO, not the CIO, not the IT director, but the CEO of the Fortune 500 companies, what was the biggest threat? So before I read that survey, I was thinking, well, pandemic, global recession, supply chain, not enough workers that they could get, salary increases, or something. Well, guess what? 66% of the Fortune 500 CEOs cited cybersecurity in their May survey of 2021. Then KPMG, earlier in the year, in March, they did a survey also of CEOs. Again, not the CIO, not the IT guy, not the chief security officer or legal officer, CEOs. And they asked, what is the top threat to you? So again, of course, I'm thinking the same thing. Well, guess what? Both the KPMG survey also came out with cybersecurity as the number one issue. To top that off, of course, hopefully you've all read in the paper recently, or I should say, not hopefully, unfortunately read about the $11 million ransom paid by JBS, which is the largest meatpacking company in the world based out of Australia. Of course, here in the United States, Continental Pipeline, for those of you that are on the southeast and the northeast, one of the largest pipeline companies in the United States, was shut down for a couple days a couple weeks ago, and they paid a $4 million ransom. And although the ransom didn't come out publicly, the Irish healthcare system, which is part of the UKI government over there, they also were shut down again due to ransomware. I'm not sure if they ever paid a ransom, but they were shut down for a week. So it was almost impossible to get healthcare in Ireland. So it's a big, big issue. So what I'm going to do is we're going to have a discussion here and talk about a number of questions, and not only what IBM sees, but what our customers are seeing. So I'm going to start off with Dan and ask it, there are a lot of areas that data protection, cyber resiliency that customers are facing. Can you sort of walk through what are the key things they should think about when they're thinking about their data protection and cyber resilience strategy?
Sure. Thank you very much. When we talk to customers, we often hear them focus on a single thing. They say, I want air gap storage to protect against ransomware, which is part of the NIST recommendations, and great. Or they may say, I need to make sure my backups are unhackable. How do I do that? What they need to do, ideally, is to look at everything. Do I need to start bringing on more snapshot capability for very fast recovery? Because most data protection infrastructure is not designed to do half your infrastructure in a business day. It's meant for, I lost a critical machine, I need to get that database back. Now it's the file server, it's the email server, all of those things, and they won't know. How much of it is safe, how much of it is not safe, how do I change how I restore to bring this back? So they have to start looking at a holistic view. They need to lock down the data protection infrastructure, make it unhackable. They need to start following the 3-2-1 rules. 3 copies, two different locations, two different types of media, one of those air-gapped or in a DR site, and start planning the recovery. Information is the big asset. I need to plan out what I need to do before it happens, because if you have to figure this out as it happens, you're going to start losing ground immediately, and you're going to be talking weeks, perhaps months, before you get everything shaken out.
Okay, great. Kurt, you of course are also talking to a number of customers all over North America, as well as to many of our business partners that of course support those customers. What are some of the key areas they ask you about as part of a data protection cyber resiliency strategy?
I think a lot of the questions are around where does cyber resiliency fit in? There's a lot of questions of, how does that differ from cybersecurity? So I like to delineate between the two and emphasize that protection is both components together, cybersecurity and cyber resiliency. And I use the analogy of a high-profile, high-dollar person like Jeff Bezos. Of course, somebody like that wants to erect a privacy wall to keep onlookers out. That's a physical barrier. That's your first layer of security, and you probably want to put some cameras on that wall to log any attempts to defeat the wall. Probably put a security guard outside the wall to do the similar things of monitoring the wall, but also allowing authorized users through. And you probably want to have someone patrolling the grounds with maybe a German Shepherd, again, to make sure no one's defeated that first layer of security. And even with those layers, you still want to lock your doors and windows at night and arm your alarm system. And those are all great. But what's the fallback plan? What if someone does get through those layers and you hear your alarm system beep and you're upstairs brushing your teeth at night? What's your fallback plan? And that's how I explain what the importance of cyber resiliency is. It is your panic room. It is your safe room. It allows you, it buys you time until the authorities come and take the intruder away. So usually the questions are really establishing what's the difference between security and resiliency, and then me stressing that they are a package, and it's that the organizations need to focus on both sides of their protection equation.
So it sounds like from what you're talking about, what the customers are asking both of you, is that if I'm going to have a company cybersecurity strategy, sounds like I can't leave the storage out. Would that be a fair assessment, that storage is important in a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy for any company?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have now a new data protection practice called cyber resiliency. The good news, while it's new, it's leveraging well-known existing protection practices. It borrows point-in-time copies from the backup practice, and it borrows recovery procedures and practices from DR. And so really what lies at the core of protecting the data is putting added layers of immutability and or isolation into the mix.
Okay. I'm going to start with Dan again. When I take a look at some of the technologies that people should incorporate to help have this, now the level below, we said storage is important in the overall cybersecurity strategy. Now, what elements of a storage portfolio are the type of things that you recommend to end users that they deploy to get this comprehensive support from a storage perspective? What are sort of things that the customer needs to think about to do from a storage perspective to adhere to this strategy?
Before I answer that question, I wanted to point out something that builds upon what you and Kurt were just talking about. If you were to imagine a customer who had the world's most effective and best-in-class security infrastructure, they have to remember they're in competition. Those vendors are in competition with a trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar industry who's always trying to get ahead. So the assumption is that you're going to be secure and locked out with the multiple walls and the guards and the dog. That's just not going to be true. We find exploits, and we attempt to share that information in IT. But if it was a black cat that found that exploit, they're going to use it to infiltrate, even if you have best in class. But I hate not answering questions. So to answer your question, typically we have, like I said, that dual-pronged approach. Once you've looked at treating your backup infrastructure as probably one of your most critical applications, so make sure it's hard and secure, make sure you put a security incident and event management tool that can accept logs from all of your IT infrastructure to detect anomalous behavior. That's sort of the table stakes. Now, what does my recovery look like? So that may mean I need to boost my snapshot capability, perhaps with features like safeguarded copy, which is immutable snapshots. And on the other end, my cold storage. Do I need to bring in object storage, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, for that second media, that third copy? Or do I bring in tape? The grandfather of all air gapped is that it has high performance, single stream restores, and the ability to truly move the media into a vault in a different location. So you're protected from all these different things. One of the things I think you've alluded to earlier is you can't just focus on ransomware. The assumption is 30% of all data breaches, for example, are done with malware. The rest are done with social engineering and insiders or deep infiltrators. So you need to account for all of this. You can't say an insider, if he has access to my disk subsystem, if it doesn't have these immutable features, he may be able to destroy the primary copy of the data, the snapshots, and the DR copy. So good security practices can help prevent that. But if you have the advanced features like safeguarded copy, that would help out a great deal as well.
Okay. Kurt, to extend that, when you look at data security, people seem to kind of stop at the edge. What are the elements that IBM recommends to have this storage element in the cybersecurity strategy? What are some of the things that the customer needs to think about deploying?
Sure. So cyber resiliency from a storage data point of view is really three things. You need a point-in-time copy, and you need to store that point-in-time copy. How it differs from a normal backup copy is, again, I referred to these earlier, 2 additional layers of protection. So you need to introduce some immutability and or isolation, and that can be logical or physical isolation. So you need a point-in-time copy tool, and then once that copy is created, it needs to be stored on protected media, and that could be tape that offers worm, that could be ICOS, which offers worm, it could be in a cyber vault used by our safeguarded copy solution. So those are the keys. Another point-in-time copy, but a special copy that's protected through immutable or isolated storage.
So follow-up, Kurt, are these special products or are these things that are integrated into IBM's existing storage technologies?
Oh, they're already integrated. So that's the beautiful thing is, as we know, tape's been out for a long time. Tape has always offered worm. We have safeguarded copy, which is integrated with our DSAK line, and soon expanding to some other IBM storage product lines.
Okay. So now, Dan, where can a customer go to learn about how all of this security technology is incorporated into our storage products? Where should they go to learn about that, and what are the if you will, reference architecture that we have out there? Where can the end users and our business partners find that information, Dan?
Well, certainly one thing IBM does very well is document. Sometimes to the point where, okay, I'm going to spend half my day once a week, reading all this different documentation. So we've got some excellent red books available on, linking to the product pages. Another excellent thing you can do is sign up to have your cyber resiliency assessment tests, where you can talk to your business partner, talk to an IBMer, and go through and say, invest a couple of hours to have an open discussion with, all the key people in your organization and IBMers, and basically answer a few, very high-level questions. They're not leading questions trying to sell any particular product in IBM's portfolio, and then a couple days later get the results, and that will give you an idea of what you need to look at. And of course, if you choose IBM to help solve some of those problems, we'll lead you through the different documentation And we do a lot of excellent work, like this forum where we post these recordings so people can get information from a variety of sources as well.
So 2 follow-ups to that. This cyber resilience assessment you mentioned, is there a fee to the end user? Do we have to charge for that, or is it something that's a no cost, or what is the cost factor for this assessment?
So the cyber resiliency assessment test is intended to be no cost other than the time of your specialist. So you don't want to just have one person, answering questions from, that you want to have the multiple perspectives. So there's certainly man hours involved, but there's not going to be a fee. And or like I said, this is not a sales tool. We're not getting in there and say, oh, by the way, sign up for this marketing, push, anything like that.
Okay. Second follow-up question before I move over to Kurt. Does this look at IBM storage only, or if I've got IBM storage and 1 or 2 other storage companies, can the resiliency assessment take a look at their storage estate, not just IBM, or is it specific to IBM only?
It's intended to be as, vendor agnostic as possible. Now, some questions obviously will refer to features that we have, that we recommend, that we built into our products for obvious reasons, but it's not going to say, have you implemented IBM X, Y, or Z? It's, do you have an object, have an air-gapped copy of your backups on object or tape, things of that nature.
Okay, great. So, Kurt, when I'm on the IT side and I've done the cyber resilience assessment, or I've talked to a business partner, and I realize that, what's sort of the next step from an overall business strategy? So now I'm the IT guy, but how do I make sure that everyone realizes what we may need to spend some money or change the processes? What's sort of the process you guide the IT guys through as they go to the next phase of getting cyber and data resilience on the storage estate? What are some of the things you advise them to do beyond just what the IT guys do?
So in the final recommendations report, we identify their current state, which allows us to point out the existing gaps in exposure. We put together the recommendations. We place those recommendations in a logical phased roadmap based on urgency and dependency. And then following that, we allow the client to absorb the recommendations, and then there's cadence calls, reoccurring cadence calls to see, is there any disagreement with how we laid out their phased roadmap? Is there any tweaks or adjustments needed to make it? And then we continually to check in to make progress on where they are on that roadmap.
Okay. Dan, you've now done the cyber resilience assessment, and they've come back and the end user says to the partner or to IBM, we have the money to do it. How long do you estimate that it usually takes to implement these recommendations? Is this a 1 week thing? Does it take 6 months? What do you advise the clients on the time commitment, and when can they get this really done by? Because obviously cybersecurity is important. At the same time, you've got regular day-to-day operations you still have to do. So what do you tell them is sort of your deployment scenario, and what should they plan on from a time perspective to get this deployed?
Well, the interesting thing about a lot of the recommendations is they don't take major changes. Harden your backup environment, start running tests, simulate some of these things, start planning your recovery. Who's in charge? Who's going to hit the big red button? Are there things I can automate? Automation is key to all of this with my existing tools to prepare. Do I, if I think I'm under an incipient attack or it's ongoing, maybe I power off a bunch of, non-critical systems that, I don't want to be infected and start spreading the infection. I start isolating things. None of that takes a great deal of, new infrastructure or software. It just takes, the organization to do it and do some testing to make sure if I power those things off, as an example, I'm not hurting something. Then some resources, if you want to use object storage and you don't want to invest to on-prem object storage in the next quarterly budget, there are cloud-based solutions, right? I can start making copies of my critical data on an air-gapped infrastructure. So you can do it in phases. If you do need to implement object and tape or build out, more automation and some SIM tools, we're probably talking 6 months to a year, depending on how fast your organization moves. If you want to start building out a cyber resilient vault, where I'm actually having making a third copy in a hardened location that has, is doing automatic detection or evaluation of the data prior to a attack actually happening, obviously that's a bigger term project, a lot more planning, and you need to partner with IBM or business partners to help figure out the best way to do that. It's not just a matter of making a third copy.
Okay, excellent. So now, Kurt, as they go through this, once they've deployed it, what are some of our recommendations to keep this up to snuff, right? They put it in, but now how do we make sure that this is all still working? So 6 months after, a year later, what are the best practices we have so that this stays the right cyber and data resilience in their storage estate? What do we recommend?
So we recommend I can speak to me. Lab services, we have an assessment that's based off the NIST framework. The NIST framework has 5 modules or stages that make up the framework: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And if you ever see the logo, it forms basically a loop, which is inferring continual improvement, continual development. So our recommendations is that organizations schedule reoccurring monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual testing to ensure that not only do the core architectural components work, but more importantly, the people and procedures piece is in place. And if you find something, you adjust, that becomes the new plan. And that's the importance of testing your plans repeatedly, is to constantly fine-tune those plans over time.
Okay, great. Now, Dan, at IBM, of course, we're all about reducing operational expenses. How much of what we can help them do in a cyber and data resilience strategy, how much of that can we help them automate?
Well, most of our products, and all the products that I touch, Spectrum Protect and that product family, all of our storage and our storage resource management, have RESTful APIs. We also have resilience orchestrators as part of our portfolio. So anything can be automated to a certain point. And I hate to give that generic, oh yeah, you can automate everything, but a great deal of it can be done as long as you have a plan. It's someone owns what's the ultimate goal and in stages, and do I automate validating my backups? Do I automate receiving logs from all my components and doing evaluation? But the fact that all of our different components have these RESTful APIs means there's nothing walled off. There's no hidden data that's inaccessible to a well-designed infrastructure. I feel that was a very marketing type of answer. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So Kurt, as I walk through this, what I'm hearing is while we put a lot into our storage technology, you really have to understand that storage is a critical component of this cybersecurity strategy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
In order to restore, you have to have that data available to restore. So that is really at the center. There's a lot of pieces, as I mentioned: identify, protect, respond, recover. You can't respond and recover if you don't have a viable copy. So that storage has to have these added layers of protection. That's how a CR copy differs from a backup copy.
Okay. Now, when the customers do this, have you ever had to go back to them and sort of come up with corrective procedures? In other words, they're doing testing and then you go along. So is this a continual improvement process to get better and better? How does IBM factor that in as we deal with our multitude of customers, big, medium, and small?
Yes, I think I kind of touched on that earlier, is that practice makes perfect, right? And so it kind of ties into a couple thoughts here. Scheduling, reoccurring testing every year is truly important. Automating as much as you can of the recovery process is truly important. It's going to save time and eliminate errors. And then just reevaluating changes to the environment and making sure any changes to the environment are brought into your CR plans.
Okay. So Dan, as we come to the half mark, I'm going to sort of wrap it up and then we'll take questions from the audience. When you look at it from the 50,000 foot view, if I'm the CEO, what am I thinking about storage security and storage resiliency? How do I get my team focused on this? Because as I mentioned at the beginning of this session, it was the #1 issue in the Fortune magazine survey of CEOs, and the #1 from KPMG, one of the leading consulting companies in the world. Their CEO survey, same thing. Cybersecurity was #1. What is sort of the strategies you get and work with these customers of ours or business partners working with those customers to get these teams to deploy? What are some of the key ticklers that you use to get people not just excited about it, but realizing that this is almost a do or die situation? What are the things that you do, Dan?
Well, first of all, if we stipulate that the executives, and you mentioned it in KPMG, but also the World Economic Forum has put cybersecurity and cyber attacks at one of the biggest risks next to wildfire and pandemic and hurricanes and things. So once they realize, and it sounds like it's almost impossible to not realize, is to make sure they understand they can't just focus on security, because even if they have the world's best, they're in competition, they're going to get hit. And identify that core team, whether it's a chief security officer or for small organizations, just a project manager to coordinate across the different teams, including partners and lines of business, what they need to do. There's a reason in that NIST cycle that the identify and the respond, that's all about planning and gathering information. They need to start figuring out what they need to protect and how do they need to recover under different scenarios, and then that will lead to testing and enhancing their environment. The big thing is make sure every every component of IT and every team is doing everything they can and will step forward and say, I'm doing everything I can. I've done these things. I've consulted with my vendors, and it's part of this overall plan. So it has to start top down and bottom up, whether it's just, hey, stop sharing your root account across your backup engines with everybody in the organization. We know that was a bad idea. We're going to stop doing that now. And I'm not going to tell you how many times I found exactly that. So where everybody knows the password to the backup software, because everyone may do a restore, and that was good practice before this. I think I kind of rambled there at the end, but you get the idea. You've got to have a plan.
Absolutely. Kurt, same question. You deal with a different set of customers while you guys work together. You also are dividing and conquering. So what are the hints you give the teams that you work with, aka our customers or our business partners, to make sure that these things get deployed and executed?
Yeah, so I would draw parallels to what's going on right now to 2001. So in 2001, disaster recovery was a well-known data protection practice, yet there were a lot of organizations that did not have a secondary site nor secondary copies. And then 9/11 happened. The world changed, the paradigm changed, and those companies that knew DR was a good idea, but yet didn't have a secondary site, soon moved, either bought their own site, built it out, or moved into a colo, leased a colo. I feel like that's where we are now with ransomware. The paradigm has changed, and it's not going away. It's here to stay. And so it's best to plan and prepare now in order to successfully withstand a cyber breach.
Okay. Well, we've got a lot of questions from the audience. So I'm going to read the questions and vector to one of the two of you. So the first is from Clint. Clint asks, how do I get more information about safeguarded copy, and can it support a 2-hour or less recovery time objective. So Dan, could you take that one first?
Sure. So as far as the capability, safeguarded copy is a new kind of copy service. It's a new kind of snapshot. So snapshot-based backup, particularly those based in hardware like safeguarded copy, are intended for very, very fast recovery. Keep in mind, in a cyber recovery, it's not just about bringing back a database. It's about bringing back a database, then letting the database owner validate that this data is good, and have whoever's orchestrating or running the recovery says, okay, the OS on this machine is patched. You can put that back in the public network. So it's a more sophisticated process than just recovering like you might get in a disaster. But yes, safeguarded copy could definitely, to meet these aggressive RTOs and RPOs, right? Because you can take them more commonly or more often because they're space-efficient snapshots. As far as more information, we have to work with your IBM rep and your business partners to start gathering more information for that.
Okay. Kurt, question from Brad. What is the average length of time for a typical cyber resiliency study from IBM?
I would say 3 to 4 weeks, and that's just total information, not total length or duration, and not total work effort. I think the bulk of it would be doing some initial data gathering. It's key that we understand your current state for the environments that are in scope. And then once we have the current state, the benefit of putting together the current state is to identify your exposure and gaps. So it's 3 to 4 weeks. Obviously, mileage varies based on the size and complexity of the organization.
Okay, great. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out and remind everybody that's that cyber resilience assessment, the question that Brett asked, and of course, the answer that you just got from Kurt is completely free, whether our business partner initiates it, whether you initiate it directly. So this is something we don't charge for. And again, it's heterogeneous in nature. So we look not just at IBM storage, but for those larger companies or even small companies that are heterogeneous in their storage estate, we look at the entire storage, not just IBM storage. Okay, another question from Clint. What level of red team testing has your immutable storage been subjected to, and any independent testing done to ensure the capabilities? Dan?
Unfortunately, my answer is, while I know we've done a lot of testing, I'm not part of that team, the team that coordinates that, so I simply don't know the answer to give you anything intelligent.
Okay, Kurt, do you have any on that?
Same. I'm ignorant to that question.
Okay. So Clint, we'll try to get back to you with an answer on that. I do know from talking to some of our field SEs and our storage architects that we do have some customers, as Kurt and Dan have both recommended, you test this and you make sure that it works, right? Just the way you would, I happen to be coming to you live from Silicon Valley, and anybody who's got a data center in Silicon Valley is absolutely testing their disaster recovery and business continuity in case there really is an earthquake. For those on the East Coast, of course, you guys have hurricanes and floods. And of course, in the Midwest, you got everything except for earthquakes. So, the smart company is testing that. So I do know that safeguarded copy has been tested extensively at some of the largest Fortune 500 accounts in the world on our mainframe. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that you all should stay tuned for what's happening on July 20th, because there will be some exciting news about safeguarded copy beyond mainframe deployments. Okay, Michael has a question. Reflect on how the ZOS Copy Services Manager fits into this resiliency protection and recovery practice. Kurt or Dan, either of you? Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to give it a shot. While that's not a product I'm an SME on, I own the same team. So Copy Services Manager allows you to, from a disaster recovery perspective, including but not exclusive to cyber resiliency, manage large-scale replication between multiple sites, including the ability to, create, testing volumes that facilitates disaster recovery testing. So that level of automation allows you to instead of saying I'm just going to make sure I'm going to go through the subsystem interface and say I'm going to set up these replication relationships, it's at a higher view where it groups those volumes together into applications, manages multi-site replication, including those practice volumes that can be used for different kinds of testing scenarios. So it's an excellent product. And I realize I sound like a sales engineer. That's because I'm a sales engineer. One of the interesting things when we talk about safeguarded copy is it's not available through like a backup product. It's managed by these secure products like Copy Services Manager or GDPS. So it's very key to not only disaster recovery, including cyber resiliency, but also the use of this new kind of immutable snapshots that we've been discussing.
Okay, excellent. Well, I see that we're coming close to the 40-minute mark. If you have any last questions, please put them into the Q&A. But I think one of the things I'd like to do is for each of you to give sort of a short summary of some of the key recommendations you would make to a mid-market company, small company, or even to a global Fortune 500 of what are the top 2 or 3 things they need to get on to make this happen. So we'll start with Kurt. Kurt, what are your top 2, 3, or 4 that you suggest for any company they need to do to get things moving in this process?
Sure. Plan and prepare now. So time is your friend if we start now. And look at the what I'll call the 4 principles of cyber resiliency. Focus on detection, focus on immutability, focus on isolation, whether it's physical or logical. And when you're looking at immutability and isolation, balance that with your service level objectives, right? So that's going to help guide you towards a disk-based solution versus a tape-based solution.
Okay. I'm going to stop you, Dan, before you reply because we have another question. So Michael's asking, we'll be implementing IBM safeguarded copy configurations on our DS8886. For those of you that don't know, that happens to be our mainframe storage product. We have both products for the mainframe and for non-mainframe environments with our flash system portfolio. So on the DS8886, following our next microcode upgrade to 88.53.3.0, what advice do you have for implementation planning?
That's a second question that you're going to have to find someone smarter than me to answer.
Okay.
Person on my team, like our distinguished engineer, Brian Sherman, they help with that planning all the time.
Okay. Kurt, anything from your perspective?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't catch it all.
Yeah, so they're going to be deploying safeguarded copy on an 8886 DS mainframe storage device at their next microcode upgrade. So he has what advice do you have for implementation planning?
So again, that's above my pay grade, but what I can say is IBM Lab Services does have implementation services regarding that solution. So that would be my first response.
Okay, so Matt Krieger is helping us. He will copy that, and we'll make sure we get that to the right person to get back to you, Michael. One of the things, again, to wrap up, it's not if you'll be attacked, it's when. And for many companies, it's not when, it's how often. Once a week, 5 times a day, what is going to be the strategy? So you got to realize that this is something that is impacting everybody. It's top of mind. So when you go down this path, whether you be a big company, the smallest company around, this is so all over the news that the CEO who can barely use his iPhone is going to be concerned about it. So, this is the kind of thing that we found, for example, on the DS side on their mainframe. Many of the time the storage guy will say, we don't have money for this, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, say, what, let's set up a meeting with our chief security officer or the chief legal officer, the CFO, depending on the size company. And once we come in and talk about this, somehow they miraculously find budget for this. So you need to realize that this is such a big issue, whether you be a huge global Fortune 2000 or whether you be Herzog's Bar and Grill. It is a huge issue, and the criminals don't care, right? In fact, some people would argue people don't really break into the big shops, right? How many times do you read about a burglary where they stole every piece of furniture from an IBM office or a GM office? By the way, that furniture is probably worth a lot of money because you know what? It's hard to do. But you read about people breaking into people's homes or in their apartments all the time. And that money does add up. So if you're small, don't think that because you're small, you're not right to be, the victim of the crime, right? And in fact, I do know from when you look at things just about overall crime, part of the reason, burglaries are common on homes is they're convinced, the burglars are, that there's not a lot of security in your house other than locking the windows and the doors. Whereas if you try to break into a major global Fortune 500, if you try to break into a Walmart, if you try to break into Toyota, one of the Toyota offices, that they got security all over the place. And that's not counting the security guards. And they assume you can't. So please, if you're a small company, don't think this is only for the big companies. Again, I encourage you to make sure that you talk to your business partner or IBM about the free cyber resiliency assessment. This is heterogeneous. So again, for those of you that either A, don't have IBM storage at all, or B, have IBM storage with another vendor, we do make this, as both Kurt and Dan pointed out, storage vendor agnostic. Why are you not doing physical air gapping to tape? That's the question. And whether that be our tape products or competitors, that's what you should be doing, and that's why we recommend it. And by the way, our tape products will work with all of our competitors' primary storage. So if you don't use IBM storage and using EMC or HPE, guess what? Our tape works perfectly fine with them. So that's the idea. I want to thank everybody for attending. This has been a very interesting session, lots of questions. I really want to thank both Kurt and Dan for all their insights, what we're doing, how people can do it. And again, I would remind the audience, this is not an if issue, it is a when issue. And this has got bigger and bigger. The University of California, San Francisco last summer, 1 million. The recent cyber attack at JBS, the large food processing company, 11 million. And by the way, although it hasn't hit the press, on the IT side, I was talking to a storage industry analyst, and they heard from an end user, and the guy wouldn't say which other end user, but he said one of his cousins is also in IT, and they tried to help his cousin's company for a $70 million ransom. Obviously, that's got to be a big company, but still, the point is, it doesn't matter whether you're Herzog's Bar and Grill or you are General Motors or Walmart. They are looking at this. And by the way, it's not just a bunch of hackers anymore. So when you look at the old movies and the hacker with the ponytail and the Birkenstocks who's drinking Jolt Cola and eating those Twinkies, this is now organized cybercrime. They may not be out there with guns like the mafia is or any of organized crime from a violent perspective, but they are organized. They're highly intelligent. They, may not walk around like in an old gangster movie, but they're trying to steal your stuff if they can get it. And they also, not only, we talked a lot about malware, ransomware, but as Dan mentioned, there is internal crime, right? The IT guy, someone goes to him and says, I would like the customer list of Walmart. And the next thing you know, it's coughed up. Maybe it doesn't have all the credit card numbers, but they know who it is. And next thing you know, the Walmart competitor is mailing coupons to every one of them. So, and that was done as an insider job. And I can tell you, I was involved in a court case. I was potentially going to be a juror. It was 7 major banks across the United States, and it was IT, and a bunch of IT guys stole $140 million before they got caught. And in this case, they were being tried in court. The Assistant Attorney General of the state of California was actually doing the case, even though it was in only a county courthouse. And the guy helping him was the Assistant Attorney General of New York, because the victims were big banks like Chase, Citi, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. So several states were involved. So that's the magnitude, but that was an internal crime. It was not the ransomware, organized crime. It was not malware. In this case, it was 10 IT guys in these several companies somehow knew each other, whether it was a trade show or something, and hatched this plan and stole $140 million before they got caught. So again, I'd like to thank everyone to close it out. Again, I'd like to remind you, we will be having another one next month in August. We'll have a different topic. Please make sure you stay tuned. You'll see it out on social media, but also talk to your IBM business partner or your IBM sales rep. And again, I would really like to thank our distinguished panelists. It's been a great session. And with that, we're going to close it out. Matt, if you could end the session, please.
Thank you.